The rain pelted my face like tiny needles as I struggled through mile 20 of the Shreveport Marathon. My legs felt like lead, and my lungs burned with each breath. I'm Diana Bennett, freelance translator, and this was supposed to be my triumphant moment. Instead, I was questioning every life choice that led me here. Keep pushing! A voice cut through the downpour. We're almost there. I turned my head slightly, catching sight of a tall blonde woman matching my pace. Her green eyes sparkled with determination, even in this miserable weather. Something about her presence made me straighten my posture. I'm Alexa, she managed between breaths. You've got this! Diana, I gasped. And I'm not so sure about that. We fell into rhythm together, our footsteps synchronizing on the wet pavement. The rain continued its assault, but somehow it felt less brutal with her beside me. Her running form was perfect, clearly a veteran marathoner. First marathon? Alexa asked, noticing my struggle. That obvious. I forced a smile. We all start somewhere. Focus on my steps. The next mile passed in a blur of shared determination. When I wanted to quit, she'd throw out a quick joke or word of encouragement. Her presence became my anchor against the storm. As we approached the final stretch, the crowd's cheers grew louder. Alexa grabbed my hand. Together? I nodded, too exhausted for words. We crossed the finish line hand in hand, collapsing into laughter as volunteers draped silver blankets over our shoulders. Coffee? She suggested, wringing water from her blonde hair. I know a place nearby that makes the best post-run lattes. An hour later, we sat in a cozy corner cafe, swapping running stories and life details. Her animated gestures and quick wit drew me in. The way she described her corporate world adventures made even board meetings sound fascinating. To surviving mile 20, she raised her mug, green eyes twinkling. To unexpected running partners, I clinked my cup against hers. Neither of us could have known then how that rainy marathon would change everything. As I watched her laugh at her own joke about marathon training, something shifted in my chest. It felt like the starting line of a different kind of race altogether. The rain had stopped by the time we exchanged numbers, promising to meet for training runs. Walking to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that this chance encounter was more than just a shared struggle through 26 miles. Sometimes the finish line is just the beginning. 2 weeks after the marathon, I sat in the lobby of Gray Industries, nervously adjusting my blazer. The universe has a twisted sense of humor. The translation contract on my lap was for none other than Alexa Gray, my marathon running partner and apparently CEO of this corporate empire. Ms. Bennett, the receptionist called. Ms. Gray will see you now. I followed her through a maze of glass offices, my heels clicking against marble floors. When we reached the corner office, I saw Alexa before she saw me. She was standing at her floor-to-ceiling window, phone pressed to her ear, blonde hair catching the morning light. She turned, and recognition flashed across her face. Her professional mask cracked into a genuine smile. Diana? Surprise, I managed, trying to maintain some semblance of professionalism. Well, this is unexpected. She ended her call and crossed the room. I had no idea you were the translator my team recommended. The following hour was a dance between professional courtesy and shared inside jokes about rain-soaked running shoes. We discussed the Japanese contracts that needed translation, but our conversation kept drifting to marathon memories and training plans. These documents are time-sensitive, Alexa explained, spreading papers across her desk. We're looking at a major partnership with a Tokyo firm. I can handle tight deadlines, I assured her, trying not to get distracted by how different she looked in her power suit compared to running gear. As evening approached, we found ourselves alone in her office, takeout containers pushed aside, poring over contract details. The city lights twinkled outside, creating an intimate atmosphere that felt dangerous. There's this great Italian place around the corner, Alexa said suddenly. We should continue this discussion over proper food. The restaurant was small and romantic, though neither of us acknowledged that fact. Over pasta and wine, business talk faded into personal stories. She told me about building her company from scratch, and I shared my adventures translating around the world. Remember when you almost quit at mile 20? She teased. Remember how you wouldn't let me? I countered, watching her eyes crinkle with laughter. The evening stretched longer than any business dinner should. We discussed everything except the growing tension between us. How her hand lingered when passing documents, how my eyes kept finding hers across the table. Walking back to our cars, Alexa stopped suddenly. This might complicate things. What might? The fact that I can't stop thinking about running with you again. The streetlight cast shadows across her face, making her look both vulnerable and powerful. Then let's run, I said. Tomorrow morning? 6 a.m., Cross Lake Trail? We both knew we were planning more than just a run. As I drove home that night, contract secured and heart racing, I wondered if I was ready for where this path might lead. The professional line was already blurring, and something told me that was just the beginning. The next morning's run would be the first of many, each step taking us closer to something neither of us could name yet. But that night, driving through Shreveport's quiet streets, all I could think about was how fate had a funny way of bringing people together twice. Our weekend running sessions became sacred ritual. Every Saturday and Sunday, as dawn broke over Shreveport, Alexa and I would meet at Cross Lake Trail. The morning fog would lift slowly, revealing the water's smooth surface and our shared solitude. "You're getting faster," Alexa noted one morning, as we paused to catch our breath. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, sweat glistening on her neck. "I have good motivation," I replied, trying not to stare at how the sunrise painted her skin golden. The Japanese contract negotiations were progressing, giving us legitimate reasons to spend time together. But we both knew our late-night translation sessions involved more stolen glances than actual work. One particularly challenging evening, we sat in her office past midnight. The Tokyo team was being difficult about certain terms, and Alexa's frustration was visible in her tense shoulders. "Here," I said, pointing to a phrase. "They're concerned about the cultural implications. It's not just about the words." She leaned closer, her perfume mixing with the coffee-scented air. "Show me." Hours passed as I explained the nuances of Japanese business culture. Alexa was a quick study, her mind sharp and curious. When she finally grasped a particularly complex concept, her face lit up with understanding. "You're brilliant," she said softly, her eyes meeting mine. The moment stretched between us, heavy with possibility. Neither of us moved, afraid to break whatever spell had fallen over her dimly lit office. The next evening, we went running at sunset. Cross Lake was painted in oranges and pinks, the water reflecting our silhouettes as we jogged along the shore. Alexa stopped suddenly, turning to face me. "Diana," she said, my name sounding different on her lips. "I need to tell you something." But before she could continue, I closed the distance between us. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, like testing unknown waters. Then her hands found my waist, pulling me closer, and everything else faded away. We broke apart, breathless for reasons beyond our run. The setting sun cast long shadows across her face, making her green eyes appear almost golden. "I've wanted to do that since mile 20, she whispered. The following weeks were a blur of stolen moments and professional pretense. During business hours, we maintained careful distance, but our running sessions grew longer, our conversations deeper. I helped her navigate the complex waters of Japanese business etiquette, teaching her key phrases and cultural customs. She soaked up knowledge like a sponge, impressing the Tokyo executives with her understanding of their traditions. "You're changing how I see everything," she told me one evening, as we watched the sun sink below the horizon. Our relationship evolved naturally, like a flower turning toward the sun. Each shared run, each late-night translation session, each quiet moment by the lake brought us closer together. But success has a way of drawing attention. As the Japanese deal grew closer to completion, more eyes turned toward us. Whispers started in the corporate hallways, subtle glances followed our movements. We knew we were walking a delicate line between personal and professional, but neither of us wanted to step back. The risk seemed worth it, even as the stakes grew higher. One night, leaving her office after another late session, Alexa caught my hand. "Stay," she said simply. And I did, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges. But for now, this moment was enough. The city lights twinkled below her office window, witnesses to our quiet revolution. The morning everything fell apart started like any other. I arrived at Gray Industries for our final review of the Japanese contracts, coffee in hand and hope in my heart. The security guard's expression should have been my first warning. his usual friendly nod replaced by a suspicious glare. Alexa's assistant met me at the elevator, her face pale. "Ms. Gray needs to see you immediately." The conference room, not Alexa's office, was my destination. Inside, I found Alexa standing rigid beside Thomas Reed, her VP, and two men I recognized from the board. Her face was a mask I hadn't seen since our first professional meeting. "Diana," her voice was carefully controlled. "The confidential documents for the Tokyo deal are missing." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Missing?" "Along with sensitive corporate data," Thomas added, his tone dripping with accusation. "Coincidentally, after you gained access to our systems." I looked at Alexa, waiting for her to defend me, but she remained silent. The weight of professional obligations and personal trust warred across her face. "This is absurd," I managed. "I would never." "The evidence suggests otherwise," Thomas interrupted. "Your after-hours access, the timing of the disappearance." The next hour was a blur of accusations and implications. They had records of my late-night presence in the building, my access to the secure servers, all twisted into something sinister. "The board recommends pressing charges," Thomas announced, watching me with calculated satisfaction. Finally, Alexa spoke. "Give us the room." Her tone left no room for argument. When we were alone, she slumped against the conference table. "Diana, help me understand." "There's nothing to understand," my voice cracked. "You know me, Alexa." "I thought I did." She ran fingers through her blonde hair. "But the evidence is circumstantial and you know it." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Think about who has more to gain from this." A knock interrupted us. Her assistant entered with a manila envelope. "This was just delivered for Miss Bennett." Inside were photos of Alexa and me running, having dinner, kissing by the lake. Beneath them a note: "Resign from the project or these go public. Next time, it will be proof of your theft." Alexa's face went white when she saw the photos. "You're being set up." "You think?" The hurt made me bitter. "Nice to see you finally believe me." "I never stopped believing you," she whispered. "But I have responsibilities. To your company." "I understand." I gathered my things, dignity intact despite shaking hands. "But you have responsibilities to your heart too." In the lobby, reporters were already gathering. News travels fast in Shreveport, especially when someone wants it to. I slipped out a side entrance, but not before hearing the first questions being shouted. "Ms. Gray, any comment on the corporate espionage allegations?" That evening, alone in my apartment, the emails started arriving. Clients canceling contracts, politely but firmly distancing themselves. My phone buzzed with Alexa's calls, but I let them go to voicemail. Around midnight, a text: "Meet me tomorrow, 5 a.m., our usual spot, please." I stared at the message until my vision blurred. The rational choice would be to lawyer up, stay away, protect myself. But my heart had stopped making rational choices the day I met her in the rain. "Okay," I replied, knowing this could either save us or destroy us completely. The night stretched endless before me, filled with questions without answers. Who was behind this? Why target us? And most importantly, could what we had built survive this storm? The pre-dawn air was thick with humidity when I arrived at Cross Lake. Alexa was already there, pacing beneath a streetlight, her corporate armor replaced by running gear. "The security footage has been tampered with," she said without preamble. "I spent all night reviewing it." "What do you mean?" "There's a gap. Exactly when the files were supposedly taken. Someone professional did this." We started running, our usual route now feeling like a covert operation. Between breaths, Alexa outlined what she'd discovered. The camera facing her office had mysterious technical issues during crucial times. The security logs showed inconsistencies. "We need proof," I said, as we rounded the lake's edge. "Real proof, not just theories. That's why we're meeting so early." Alexa checked her watch. "The cleaning crew doesn't arrive until 6. We have an hour." Breaking into your own office shouldn't feel this thrilling, but my heart raced as Alexa used her keycard to access the empty building. The emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the deserted halls. "The security center is on the 3rd floor," she whispered, leading the way. "Thomas insisted on handling the investigation personally." "Convenient," I muttered. The security room was locked with a keypad. Alexa punched in a code, then caught my questioning look. CEO privileges. Inside, dozens of monitors displayed different angles of the building. Alexa sat at the main computer while I watched the door. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, diving deep into backup files. "Here," she said suddenly. "Look at this timestamp." The footage showed me entering the building at 9 p.m. on the night in question. The next frame jumped to 11 p.m., showing me leaving. But I remembered that night clearly. We'd been together until midnight. "Someone edited out 2 hours." Alexa's voice was tight with anger. "And did a poor job hiding it." We dug deeper, finding more discrepancies. Files modified, logs altered, all pointing to a careful plan to frame me. But who had access to make these changes? A noise in the hallway sent us scrambling. We barely made it around the corner before the early maintenance worker passed by, whistling tunelessly. "We need to check Thomas's office," Alexa whispered once the coast was clear. His office yielded another surprise. Hidden behind his monitor, we found a small device attached to his computer. "A keystroke logger," Alexa explained. "But I didn't authorize this." The morning sun was starting to peek through windows when we made our final discovery. In Thomas's desk drawer, buried under files, was a receipt from a private security firm specializing in corporate espionage. "He's working with someone," I said, photographing the evidence with my phone. "This is bigger than just framing me." Alexa's face was grim. "The Tokyo deal. It would be worth millions to our competitors." We barely made it out before the first employees arrived. Standing in the parking lot, sweat cooling on our skin, we looked at each other with new understanding. "I'm sorry I doubted you," Alexa said softly. "You didn't, not really." I touched her hand briefly. "But we're not done yet." She nodded, her green eyes fierce with determination. "Tonight, my place. We need to plan our next move." As I drove home, my mind raced with possibilities. We had evidence of tampering but needed to prove who was behind it. One thing was certain: Thomas Reed had underestimated us both. The morning news was already reporting on the corporate theft scandal, but they didn't have the real story. Not yet. Soon, though, the truth would come out, and someone's carefully constructed plan would crumble. For now, we had to move carefully, gather more evidence, and watch our backs. The game had changed, and we were no longer just running from accusations, we were running toward the truth. The headlines were everywhere. Corporate Translator suspected in industrial espionage. My phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from concerned clients, each one politely but firmly severing ties. Years of building my reputation, gone in a matter of days. "Just delete the voicemails," Alexa said, watching me from her kitchen counter. We'd taken to meeting at her penthouse, away from prying eyes. "We'll fix this." But the cost was mounting. My savings were dwindling, and the whispers followed me everywhere in Shreveport. Even my morning runs became exercises in avoiding suspicious glances from former clients. "The Tokyo team is getting nervous," Alexa admitted, pouring us both wine. "They're threatening to pull out of the deal." The weight of it all hit me suddenly. "This is destroying everything you've built too." She crossed the room, taking my face in her hands. "Hey, look at me, you're worth it." That night, we let ourselves forget about the investigation. The city lights twinkled below her windows as we held each other, finding comfort in the quiet moments between chaos. Her lips tasted like wine and promises as we lost ourselves in each other. Morning brought reality crashing back. Thomas had called an emergency board meeting, and Alexa couldn't avoid it. I watched her transform from the soft, vulnerable woman of last night into the steel-spined CEO, her armor perfectly in place. "Be careful," I said as she left. The board meeting was worse than expected. Alexa called me afterward, her voice tight with controlled anger. "They're questioning my judgment. Thomas suggested I'm compromised by our relationship. He's trying to discredit you too. Let him try." But I heard the strain beneath her confidence. That afternoon, I received another anonymous threat. This time, they included bank statements, fabricated ones showing large deposits to offshore accounts in my name. "They're getting desperate," Alexa said when I showed her. "Making mistakes." But the pressure was taking its toll on both of us. Alexa's board was growing increasingly hostile, questioning every decision she made. My professional contacts had dried up completely, leaving me effectively blacklisted in the translation industry. Late one night, as we pored over evidence in her living room, Alexa received a call that made her face go pale. The Tokyo team is arriving early. They want answers about the security breach. We stayed up until dawn, preparing documentation and planning our strategy. Somewhere between the third cup of coffee and sunrise, Alexa turned to me with tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry I brought this storm into your life. I silenced her with a kiss. We're in this together. The next day, watching her stride into another board meeting, I realized how much we had both changed. The carefree runners who met in the rain were gone, replaced by warriors fighting for survival. But something else had grown stronger, the bond between us, forged in crisis and strengthened by trust. Each attack meant to break us apart only pushed us closer together. That evening, exhausted and worried, we found ourselves back at Cross Lake. The sunset painted the water gold, reminding us of simpler times. Whatever happens tomorrow, Alexa said, I want you to know something. Meeting you that day in the rain? Best thing that ever happened to me. I squeezed her hand, watching the fading light reflect in her eyes. Tomorrow would bring new battles, but for now, we had this moment. Sometimes love means fighting not just for each other, but for the truth itself. The night wrapped around us like a blanket as we planned our next move. We were done being victims. It was time to take control of our story. The breakthrough came at 3 a.m. Alexa and I were in her home office, surrounded by stacks of documents and empty coffee cups, when we found it. A pattern in the server access logs that pointed directly to Thomas Reed's computer. Look at these timestamps, I said, highlighting the entries. Every unauthorized access happened while you were in board meetings. Alexa's face hardened as she studied the evidence. Meetings that Thomas scheduled. We'd been so focused on proving my innocence that we'd missed the obvious. Thomas hadn't just framed me, he'd orchestrated the entire situation, using board meetings as his cover. The next morning, Alexa walked into Gray Industries like a storm about to break. I watched from a coffee shop across the street as she entered the building, her blonde hair catching the morning sun. My phone buzzed with a text. Board meeting in 30. Wish me luck. The meeting started normally enough, according to Alexa's later account. Thomas presented his usual evidence against me, his voice dripping with false concern. Then Alexa stood up. Before we continue, she said, I'd like to discuss some interesting data from our server logs. Thomas's face barely flickered, but it was enough. As Alexa presented our findings, the board's attention shifted. Questions were asked. Doubts were raised. Then Thomas made his fatal mistake. You're letting your personal relationship cloud your judgment, he snapped at Alexa. This translator has compromised you. The boardroom went silent. Alexa's voice could have frozen fire. Interesting choice of words, Thomas, especially since I never mentioned any personal relationship in this meeting. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Board members exchanged glances. Thomas's confident smile cracked slightly. We all know about your involvement, he tried to recover. It's been obvious. The only thing that's obvious, Alexa cut in, is how much inside information you seem to have about my personal life. She laid out more evidence, the suspicious timing of the document theft, the tampered security footage, the anonymous threats that somehow knew details only an insider would know. Thomas's face went from confident to concerned to panicked in the space of minutes. When Alexa revealed the keystroke logger found in his office, he broke. You don't understand, he sputtered. The company was at risk. Your judgment was compromised. The only thing compromised, Alexa's voice cut like steel, was your loyalty. The board called for an immediate suspension pending investigation. As security escorted Thomas out, he looked straight at me through the coffee shop window, his face twisted with rage. This isn't over, he mouthed. Later that night, in Alexa's penthouse, we should have been celebrating. Instead, we were both on edge. Thomas's words felt like a promise, not a threat. He's working with someone, Alexa said, pacing. The technology used a sophisticated frame-up, it's bigger than him. We need to find out who, I agreed, before they try something else. She stopped pacing suddenly, turning to me with fierce determination. I won't let them hurt you again. Us, I corrected, pulling her close. They tried to hurt us. The city lights twinkled below, unchanged by the day's drama. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight we had this, the truth starting to emerge, our bond stronger than ever. As we fell asleep that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that Thomas's removal wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something bigger, something that could either destroy everything we'd built or make us unstoppable. The question was, were we ready for what came next? The plan came together over breakfast at Alexa's penthouse. Between bites of toast and sips of coffee, we mapped out our strategy to expose the entire conspiracy. Thomas will be clearing out his office today, Alexa said, spreading blueprints of the building across her kitchen island. Security will escort him, but they'll give him privacy to pack personal items. That's our window. I nodded, studying the layout. How long do we have? Standard protocol is 1 hour. She tapped the blueprints. His office is here, 3rd floor, east wing. We spent the morning preparing. Alexa had acquired a small recording device, barely larger than a button. I practiced placing it under desk edges, making sure it wouldn't be visible. Remember, she said, adjusting the device on my collar. If anything feels wrong. I get out immediately, I finished, catching her hand. I know. The plan was simple but risky. I would pose as a cleaning staff member, using the badge Alexa had procured. While Thomas packed his office, I'd enter under the pretense of emptying his trash, planting the recording device in the process. At exactly 2 p.m., I walked into Gray Industries wearing a maintenance uniform. My heart pounded as I pushed my cleaning cart past security, but they barely glanced at my borrowed badge. 3rd floor, I heard Thomas's voice before I saw him, talking to someone on his phone. Yes, I'm clearing it out now. Don't worry, everything's handled. I waited around the corner, counting to 60 before approaching his office. The door was open, boxes scattered across the floor. Thomas was facing the window, still on his phone. Just make sure the money's ready, he was saying. Once this is done, I'll need to move quickly. I knocked softly, holding up my trash bag. He waved me in without turning, too engrossed in his conversation. As I bent to empty his trash can, I carefully placed the recording device under his desk. The board doesn't suspect anything, Thomas continued. Gray's too focused on protecting her precious translator to see the bigger picture. I forced myself to move slowly, methodically, just another invisible maintenance worker. But my hands shook as I gathered the trash, every instinct screaming to run. Then his phone conversation took a dark turn. No, we stick to the plan. Once the Tokyo deal falls apart, the board will have no choice but to remove her. Then we move in with the takeover. I was almost at the door when he said something that made my blood freeze. If the translator becomes a problem again, we handle it permanently. I managed to make it to the hallway before my composure cracked. Alexa was waiting in an empty conference room 2 floors up, monitoring everything through her phone. Did you get it? She whispered as I slipped inside. I nodded, hands still shaking. He's planning something big, a takeover. We spent the next hour listening to the live feed from the recording device. Thomas made 3 more calls, each one revealing more pieces of the puzzle. He was working with a rival company, orchestrating a hostile takeover of Gray Industries. The Tokyo deal was just the beginning, Alexa realized. They're trying to tank our stock value. As evening fell, we had our smoking gun. Thomas had outlined the entire conspiracy, naming names and detailing plans, all captured on our hidden device. We take this to the board tomorrow, Alexa said, her voice hard with determination. End this once and for all. But as we left the building, a text message lit up her phone. Check your email. The attached video showed us planting the recording device, filmed from inside Thomas's office. Damn, Alexa breathed. He knew. We'd walked right into his trap, and now he had evidence of our espionage. The question was, what would he do with it? Dawn hadn't yet broken over Shreveport when Alexa's phone erupted with notifications. Thomas had made his move, sending the video of our office infiltration to every board member. He's calling for an emergency meeting, Alexa said, her voice steady despite the chaos. 9 But Thomas had made a crucial mistake. In his eagerness to expose us, he'd forgotten about the recording device still hidden under his desk. It had captured every conversation since our plant, including one very incriminating call to his CO conspirators. We go in together, I insisted, watching Alexa dress for battle in her sharpest suit. No more hiding. The Gray Industries lobby was buzzing with tension when we arrived. Employees whispered behind their hands as we passed, but Alexa held her head high, her hand firmly clasped in mine. Thomas was already in the boardroom, looking smugly triumphant. "Quite a performance yesterday," he sneered as we entered. The cleaning uniform was a nice touch. The board members sat in stony silence, the video evidence playing on repeat on the conference room screen. I watched our grainy figures move through Thomas's office, planting the device. Alexa stood, her voice cutting through the tension. "Before you make any decisions, I suggest you listen to what that device recorded." She connected her phone to the speakers, and Thomas's own voice filled the room. "Once the Tokyo deal falls apart, we move forward with the hostile takeover. Sterling Industries is ready with the capital." The color drained from Thomas's face as his conspiracy unfolded in his own words. The board listened in growing horror as he detailed plans to destroy the company from within. "That recording was obtained illegally," he sputtered. "True," Alexa acknowledged, "but it's admissible in a criminal investigation." On cue, 2 police detectives entered the boardroom. They'd been waiting in the lobby, armed with warrants based on the evidence we'd gathered. "Thomas Reed," the lead detective announced, "you're under arrest for corporate espionage and conspiracy to commit fraud." What followed was a blur of activity. Thomas was led out in handcuffs, shouting accusations. Police technicians swarmed his office, uncovering more evidence of his collaboration with Sterling Industries. By afternoon, the story had broken across all major news outlets. "Corporate espionage ring exposed at Gray Industries." My name was cleared, as Thomas's true motives came to light. The Tokyo team, far from pulling out, was impressed by how Alexa had handled the crisis. They signed the deal that evening, expressing confidence in her leadership. "Ms. Bennett," their chief negotiator said, bowing slightly, "we would be honored to work with you on future translations." Later, in Alexa's office, we watched the sunset paint the sky in victory colors. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from former clients, all eager to rebuild bridges. "I'm thinking of starting my own agency," I said, leaning against her desk. "Specialize in corporate translations, maybe partner with a certain CEO I know?" Alexa smiled, pulling me close. "I like the sound of that." The board had called another meeting for tomorrow, but this time to discuss expansion plans, not accusations. Our names were cleared, our relationship no longer a secret to hide. "We should celebrate," Alexa suggested. "Dinner at that Italian place where we had our first business meeting?" I laughed, remembering how we'd tried so hard to keep things professional back then. "How about we order in instead?" That night, curled together on her couch, we watched the news coverage of Thomas's arrest. The reporters got most of the story right, but they missed the most important part. "They don't mention how we fell in love solving this mystery," I mused. Alexa kissed my temple. "Some things are just for us to know." Outside, Shreveport hummed with nightlife, unaware that its latest scandal had brought 2 people even closer together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but we'd face them like we faced everything else, together. 6 months after Thomas's arrest, I stood in my new office, watching the morning sun glint off the Bennett Translation Agency sign on the door. The space was modest but perfect, just 3 blocks from Gray Industries. My phone buzzed with a text from Alexa. "Ready for our run?" Some traditions never change. Every morning, rain or shine, we still met at Cross Lake Trail. Only now, our runs were filled with talk of business expansion and shared dreams instead of corporate conspiracies. "I hired 2 more translators yesterday," I told her as we stretched beside the lake. "The Tokyo contract is keeping us busy." Alexa beamed with pride. After the scandal, she'd made sure my agency got first consideration for all Gray Industries international contracts, but I'd earned every project since then on merit alone. "Speaking of Tokyo," she said, falling into step beside me, "the board wants to expand our Asian operations." We ran in comfortable silence, the morning mist rising off the lake. Other runners nodded in recognition as we passed. We'd become something of a local legend after the news coverage died down. "Remember when we could barely make it through a marathon?" I laughed, realizing how far we'd come. Alexa slowed to a stop, her expression suddenly serious. "I've been thinking about that day a lot lately." She led me to a bench overlooking the water, the same spot where we'd shared our first kiss. The morning sun painted everything in gold, including her nervous smile. "That marathon changed my life," she said, taking my hand. "Meeting you, running beside you, falling in love with you, it's the best thing that ever happened to me." My heart started racing, and not from the run. Alexa. She pulled a small box from her running jacket. I had this whole speech planned, but looking at you now, in the morning light, all I can think is how I want to run every race, face every challenge, and celebrate every victory with you. The ring caught the sunlight as she opened the box. Simple, elegant, perfect. Just like us. Diana Bennett, she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. Will you marry me? Yes, I whispered, then louder. Yes! The ring slid perfectly onto my finger, like it was always meant to be there. We kissed as other runners jogged past, some cheering, others politely averting their eyes. Later that day, I walked into my office to find it filled with flowers. My team had already heard the news. Nothing stays secret for long in Shreveport. About time. My assistant grinned, handing me a stack of contracts to review. The day passed in a blur of congratulatory calls and translation work. By evening, when Alexa picked me up, the news had spread through both our companies. The board sends their congratulations, she said as we drove home. They're surprisingly sentimental about it all. Well, we did save the company while falling in love. That night, celebrating over champagne in her, soon to be our penthouse, we talked about the future, about building something together that was bigger than both of us. I was thinking, Alexa said, tracing the ring on my finger. We should run that marathon again, on our anniversary. I curled into her side, watching the city lights twinkle below. Starting where we began? Starting where we began, she agreed, but knowing where we're going. The ring caught the light as I reached for her hand, a constant reminder that sometimes the best translations aren't between languages, but between hearts. Outside, Shreveport hummed with life, unaware that its biggest corporate scandal had led to its sweetest love story. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new races to run, but tonight was just for us. And as we planned our future together, I realized that some finishes lines are really just beautiful beginnings. 1 year to the day after we first met, Alexa and I stood at the starting line of the Shreveport Marathon. The morning was eerily similar, gray skies, threatening rain, nervous energy in the air. Ready to make better memories? Alexa squeezed my hand, her wedding ring catching what little sunlight broke through the clouds. We'd married 2 months ago in a small ceremony by Cross Lake, surrounded by friends and colleagues. Even the board members attended, thoroughly won over by our story. The starting gun fired, and we fell into an easy rhythm together. Unlike last time, we weren't strangers pushing through pain. We were partners, pacing each other, sharing knowing smiles at each mile marker. Mile 20 coming up, Alexa grinned, as we approached the spot where we'd first encouraged each other. My translation agency had grown to 10 employees, handling international contracts across Asia and Europe. Gray Industries had expanded its global presence, with Alexa at the helm of a now thriving corporation. The rain started at mile 22, soft and steady. Other runners groaned, but we laughed, remembering our first rainy encounter. Remember how you almost quit? Alexa teased, water dripping from her blonde hair. Remember how you wouldn't let me? The finish line came into view, crowds cheering despite the weather. But instead of sprinting toward it, we slowed our pace, savoring these last moments. Look, I pointed to a group near the finish. My entire translation team was there, holding a banner. Next to them stood Alexa's board members, looking slightly uncomfortable in the rain but smiling broadly. We crossed the finish line hand in hand, just like we had a year ago. Only this time, when we collapsed into laughter, it was as wives, as partners, as two people who had found each other in the rain and refused to let go. The celebration afterward was held at our favorite Italian restaurant, now a regular spot for business lunches and date nights. Stories were shared, toasts were made, and plans for the future were discussed. To mile 20, Alexa raised her glass, green eyes sparkling with memories and promises. To unexpected running partners, I added, thinking of how a single rainy marathon had changed everything. Later that night, we stood on our penthouse balcony, watching lightning dance across the Shreveport skyline. The storm that had started during the marathon had grown stronger, but we were safe and dry, wrapped in each other's arms. Same time next year? Alexa asked, playing with my wedding ring. Every year, I promised, rain or shine. Below us, the city lights flickered through the rain, reminding me of all the nights we'd spent planning, hoping, fighting for our future. We'd faced corporate espionage, public scandal, and personal doubts, emerging stronger with each challenge. Thomas was serving time for his crimes, the scandal now just another chapter in our story. The Tokyo deal had expanded into a network of international partnerships, our companies growing together just as we had. You know, Alexa mused, most people would say running a marathon in the rain is terrible luck. I turned in her arms, remembering that first desperate moment when a stranger's encouragement had kept me going. I'd say it was the luckiest rain of my life. The storm continued through the night, but we didn't mind. We had each other, we had our dreams, and we had all the time in the world to run toward them together. Some people spend their whole lives searching for their perfect pace, their ideal partner, their true purpose. I found all three on a rainy day in Shreveport, at mile 20 of a marathon I almost didn't finish. Sometimes the best stories start with a little rain and a lot of heart. Ours certainly did.